Okay, well, thank you all. I'm really so excited about all of your talks, and I think you all touched on a certain point that I would like to ask a question about. So Joe, Claire, and Mariota all emphasized the importance of skills and putting people in the center stage of the digital transformation on islands. And that means retaining talents, improving education, focusing on well-being, on the environment, conservation, and really how we see the future, not letting digital transition take over. So in a practical sense, what can islands do to ensure that people have access to the right digital skills? And who and what kind of actors should do what and play which role in that transition?
I'm going to take a stab at it, because I think for too long, the small island developing states, we've been focused on the low end. And so we are talking a lot about, we're bringing jobs in for call centers, for example, right? Call centers. And yes, it's employing a lot of people, but you're employing people who are coming out of a university, for example, and then they're going to be answering phones. So I think we need to have different approaches for different levels. This technology is going to be so complex that we certainly need to have a couple of people who understand where it's going. We need to be able to borrow from. And the case of small island states, we may not have the world's biggest, and latest natural language processing person at the university on the island, but you certainly have them in the diaspora or in another island. And you need to create these structures that allow the sort of a knowledge base to be accessible to your decision making, because you have to understand the fundamental direction in which the technology is going. And then you have to have the engineers, you have to have leaders who understand the technology. And many of the policymakers are not from an engineering background, they're from legal backgrounds, they're afraid of anything to do with technology and mathematics. And so we have a gap. So I think we really have to have manifold strategies to have different types of knowledge and learnings and understandings be available across the whole sector of people who will be affected by the choice.
Okay, I'd like to jump in here as well because I think Mariota actually, I used to describe Jersey as the Goldilocks Island. It wasn't too big, it wasn't too small. It had different sort of, like financial services plus tourism plus agri-tech, etc. It's a perfect island for doing this type of activity. But I was thinking one of the things they're talking about is the fact of being able to use their tax laws, being able to actually use what they have. So I can't remember if it's Turks and Caicos or Antigua. They came up with a scheme looking at what was actually happening in the Baltic states, particularly around the idea of they were looking at trying to attract sort of major technology companies to their island to create R&D facilities. And one of the things they came up with was they would actually they would tax the IP at their rates for 50 years. Now, if you're an Amazon or a Google or someone else actually getting your IP taxed at local rates as opposed to US developed countries or wherever, that's a marvelous way of actually using what they have as a unique facility to create inward investment of the type of economies that they're looking for. And of course, the actual quid pro quo was you would have to make sure that X amount of the jobs that you were creating were for local people. So you were going to train them up and give them proper high value jobs that actually could be operated remotely. So it's this type of thinking that's, of diversification, of actually saying, what have we got? What can we use to actually attract the inward investment that we're wanting to create the sort of jobs that we need on these islands to keep the best people here? I thought it was a great idea. It was like, it came out of the Estonian, the Estonian e-residency certificate. So it's a similar concept. It's how can we actually use our ability to create this type of approach to attract the inward investment we need to create the skills that we need and the jobs that we need to keep people on the islands.
No, that's right. I mean, a part of this is around, there are multiple levers to pull on. And I think the innovation and I think the cleverness is, what levers to pull, and there's multiple levers to pull on, because, skills and a skilled workforce is so huge, from ensuring that there's no sort of digital disparity all the way through to trying to reskill and upskill, the current workforce. So I think, yeah, you're right, Joe. I mean, it's how do you get inward investment, but there's also a whole lot of other sort of levers to pull on.
Yeah, thank you all so much. That's really insightful. And I think, as you mentioned, there's just so many different aspects of this, and getting people those high valued skilled jobs and pulling on the right levers. It's very, very important. I will ask one more question before we jump into the panel part of this, and maybe I will go to you again, Claire, and then to Joe and to Mariota. So linking to the ecosystems aspect, how can government, businesses, and academia interact to unlock the potential of digitalization for islands?
Okay, so I think we have to think about things in, again, new ways of being. I like to always begin with the story. I think if we can get them to begin with the future they want and have a conversation about the future they want, then we're more likely to get them to work together. Right now, we don't have a shared vision. I don't think there's a strongly shared vision. And I use the case study of Jamaica, for example, who has a 2030 vision statement that predates the SDGs. And when I would ask a private sector company, or when I would ask the average taxi driver or university person, how do they see themselves in it? They say, oh, that's a government thing. And so the decision makers and policymakers have to do a much better job at taking participatory processes from just merely the perfunctory. We're going to have a consultation where they talk at people, to have a different kind of a consultation where you're talking with people to co-create something. And I think by really looking at storytelling and story making, I love futures thinking. I'm a futurist. I love storytelling. I think if we're able to have more shared stories about what success looks like and how that success benefits each of this tripartite parts of the ecosystem, even if people are doing different things, we're more likely to achieve that success.
I see. One of the great barriers, particularly when you're dealing with government, is the fact that who pays and who benefits. Okay, that's always a problem area. So you've actually got to create an atmosphere of enlightened self-interest. I love this phrase because it makes people do things that they wouldn't necessarily normally do. Once they actually appreciate what benefit it is to them to do something, then they might throw their money in the pot, or they might actually come up with legislation or whatever to make it work. When we actually were doing it with the UK government, the original sort of e-government thing was we would get everybody in. This shows how old I am. This was under Tony Blair. We get everybody in and the major government departments, and then we form this e-government group, etc. And of course, they came in, and the HMRC was still fighting for the HMRC. The DVLA was still fighting for the DVLA. The Treasury was still fighting for the Treasury. So we came up with this cunning plan. The cunning plan was, we said, okay, you are no longer the e-government person for the Treasury. You are now the e-government person for over 60s. You give them a horizontal view, and then they come out of their departmental mindset because they now have a horizontal thing they need to deal with. And that starts that process of where they start looking in the Gestalt manner at how it works. It's purely psychology, but it works, and it's kind of practical. And then I like practical ways of actually making people do things they wouldn't actually normally do. That's one of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, what we've tried to design with Impact Jersey is looking at identifying an issue and really getting into, what are the different dynamics around that issue or that problem, and then also the opportunities. And what you start seeing is you start pulling people out of their departmental, I like your departmental zone where they're very comfortable, and you're actually forcing them to take a really integrated view across it. And then you patch on top of that the commercials because you've got a technical solution which resides somewhere else, and now you're incentivizing, you're bringing them to the island, and you got, you know, within the care sector, you know, and this is no doubt, you know, in other jurisdictions as well, you know, we've got charities who are operating, who are actually busy doing the doing, and they don't have the opportunity to have, you know, a skill set that can deploy complex technical problems, technical projects or technology projects or digitization at all. And so what we're trying to do is try and mash these guys together, create these teams, and then provide the funding, and then layer on top of that almost like an academic approach to understanding whether or not this project is contributing to longer term outcomes. What are the things that can be done again, repeated, and what are the things that can be avoided? How can we make this more optimized? And once we're able to share these reports and get out there, that then lifts the industry, and then that actually provides, I think, coming back to what Claire was saying, that's some storytelling. That's some storytelling about how an outcome was achieved and how actually bringing people together out of their silos, you know, provides that best opportunity to get the right solution in place.
Yeah, can I come back again as well, though? Because actually one of the things I find massively successful is the fact to turn yourself from a cost center to a revenue center. So when I was heading up the innovation team at Bristol City Council, we brought in about 15 million a year on government grants, commission grants, etc. That allowed me to have a seat at the table. And if you go into that seat at the table and you're not just saying, I would like you to pay for this, you go in there and say, this is a really good idea, and I've got 2 million I can stick in the pot. That actually changes the atmosphere entirely. So start thinking about where you can actually create people who are good at, you know, getting funding. And once you've got that, you've got a seat at the table, and you've got a way of influencing where the major expenditure occurs.
Absolutely agree. You know, and I think this is the tough part. Usually we'd all be sort of talking about integrated planning or integrated programs without the necessary funding. You know, and I think that's absolutely right. We've got to be able to sort of find, you know, where those grants are, bring them together, and then start delivering some showcase projects, you know, demonstrate real change.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And to wrap up this section, I will ask just one sentence, if you can stay with us for 1 more minute. If you could answer in one sentence, ideally, what dangers may digitalization have to an island? That's a great question from the chat. Oh, sorry. I think you're muted, Claire.
Yeah, what's the question? What danger?
The question is, what risks or what dangers may a digital transformation bring to an island?
Wow. State capture.
Nice one. Wrapped it up in one word. 2 words. Great. Thank you.
So I'm trying to think of what is bad about digitization. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that obviously, because it's what I do daily. So and I'm coming at it. It's a good thing. But it's actually, what do you do with the data, I suppose, and it's got to be with the right privacy, security protocols that allow you to have control over what people know about what you're doing. And we've seen countries where that is compromised. It's not necessarily a Western European thing, but it can be compromised. So it's scrutiny, I suppose. And as humans, we don't want to be scrutinized. Simple as that.
Roger that. Mariota?
I'm with Joe. I'm fully into the digitalization. It's very positive. So I think flipping it is quite hard. I think what risks does it bring? I think if you have an agenda to digitize, I think there's a risk that you don't bring people with you. And there's fear, and as Joe was saying, there's fear. There's a whole lot of interest, and there's a willingness to just try and protect as much as possible. Digitization has the biggest opportunity to democratize knowledge, democratize how things are done, and sort of create a new type of ways of working, ways of living, that we've never seen before. the biggest risks that it brings with it are people who do not want to change and adapt.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I really, really appreciate this informative talk from all three of you. And yeah, I think all of you highlighted the importance of bringing people along with you and the importance of keeping people and islands and their goals center stage in this digital transformation. So again, thank you very, very much. And you're welcome to stick around for the second half of our meeting if you like. We will now go on to practical examples from islands around the world who are actually employing digital transformation on their islands.
Thank you very much for having me. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye.